a seat. So we are holding a public meeting to receive input from the community with respect to amendments to the business license bylaw regarding residential rental properties. This means anyone who feels that their interest is affected by the bylaw will be afforded the opportunity to speak. So I want Councillor Beck to get off this meeting off in a good way with the acknowledgement.
Thank you. We respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, the Squamish, and the Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands.
Thank you, Councillor Beck. This public meeting is being convened pursuant to Section 59 of the Community Charter and is being held in a hybrid meeting format, meaning there is a combination of in-person and electronic participation by some or all members of council or by staff and the public. The meeting is being streamed live over the internet and recorded in accordance with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Public participation in the meeting is being accommodated by speakers having signed up in advance, as stated in the notice of meeting, as well as observers being provided the Zoom meeting information on the DNV website and the notice of meeting. Written submissions will be received by the corporate officer on behalf of and shared with council at any time up until the next council meeting hears it. These may be submitted to input@dnv.org. Therefore, in this manner, all persons will be afforded a reasonable opportunity to be heard and to present written submissions. And so I'll have more of the details of speaking, but right now I think we want to move to the presentation by staff. Mr. Mazzelli, if you would. Pardon me? I'll introduce the bylaw first. You want me to introduce it? Oh, okay. Pardon me. We clerk is going to introduce the bylaw first.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bylaw 8727 proposes to amend the business license bylaw in general terms by deleting the definitions of apartment house and property rentals, adding definitions for commercial rental property, dwelling unit, owner, purpose-built residential rental building, and residential rental property, replacing the definition of registered society, adding a requirement to obtain a business license to operate a residential rental property if it is a purpose-built rental building, adding a requirement to obtain a business license to operate 2 or more residential rental properties in the municipality. Residential tenancies located on an owner's principal residence property do not count towards this threshold. Registered societies are exempt from this requirement, and adding a requirement for a new or renewed business license related to residential rental property to submit a declaration signed by the owner or their authorized agent in the form prescribed by the inspector. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mazzelli, you're on now. Sorry about that earlier for a presentation. Now this will be followed by the request for anyone who wants to speak and online or in the chambers. And that'll be followed by questions from council. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. My name is John Maselli, and I'm a planner in the Community Planning Department at the district. I'm here this evening to present the proposed update to our existing business licensing regulations for specific categories of residential rental properties. This presentation will take approximately 10 minutes and we'll review the background leading to this proposal and its current status, the key features of a proposed licensing framework, including who it would apply to and its exemptions, the main objectives of the framework and how it relates to regional practices, and the proposed fees, compliance approach, and next steps following tonight's meeting. To provide some background and bring everyone up to date, this proposed licensing framework for specific residential rental properties revisits a topic that was first discussed with council at a workshop held on January 20th, 2025. During that workshop, staff presented early concepts for modernizing our regulations regarding the licensing of residential rental properties. Coming from this workshop, staff developed this licensing framework, which is the subject of tonight's public input opportunity. The proposed bylaw amendments from this framework received first reading on May 26, 2025. Currently, the district does have existing bylaws that regulate the licensing of certain rentals, primarily purpose-built apartment buildings. However, as the slide indicates, this current framework has limitations. In 2024, only 15 business licenses were issued for purpose-built rental buildings. This suggests that a number of these operations are currently unlicensed. This proposal seeks to address these limitations and bring more consistency to our approach. The framework being proposed focuses on residential rental properties that are being operated primarily as a business activity for gain or profit. These are distinct operations from smaller scale situations, such as mortgage helper scenarios involving secondary suites on an owner's principal residence property. Under this framework, a business license would be required under two scenarios. First, it would apply to owners of all purpose-built residential rental buildings, and an exemption would apply for buildings owned by nonprofit societies. Second, a license would be required for owners who are renting out dwelling units on two or more separate residential rental properties located within a district. And for clarity, a residential rental property refers to a property containing one or more dwelling units that are subject to a residential tenancy agreement under the Provincial Residential Tenancy Act. And a dwelling unit is the individual living space being rented. The proposed license fee, which will be discussed later, would apply per dwelling unit on these licensed properties. A key aspect of this licensing framework involves specific exemptions as shown on this slide. These are designed to avoid burdening individual homeowners who may have smaller scale rental arrangements. As shown on the left, a business license would not be required for dwelling units such as secondary suites or coach houses that are located on an owner's principal residence property. In addition, these principal residence properties themselves are not counted towards the two property threshold mentioned for other rental properties. And on the right side, owners who are renting out only one residential rental property, for example, a single strata unit or a single house, which is not their principal residence, would also be exempt under this framework. So to summarize the proposed exemptions, if you only rent out units on your principal residence property, you would not need this license. If you live in your principal residence and also rent out only one other rental property, you would also not need this license. So this targeted approach focuses the licensing requirement on more extensive rental operations, or those clearly operating as rental businesses. To further clarify how this would apply, here are some examples of who would need a license. First, an owner of a purpose-built rental building. If an individual or corporation owns, for instance, a 50-unit rental building, a license would be required. This aligns with our existing practice for these types of properties. Next, if a property owner rents out a strata unit and also rents out a separate single-family home, and they do not live in either of these properties as their principal residence, they would require a license. This is because they are operating two distinct rental properties that are not the principal residence. Similarly, if an owner rents out two separate residential strata units and neither is their principal residence, they would also require a business license. And the same would apply for an owner renting out two separate single-family properties. Now let's look at some examples of who would not need a license under this proposal. So the first example is an owner who lives in their main dwelling unit and rents out both a secondary suite and a coach house located on that same principal residence property. They would be exempt. All rental activity is contained within their principal residence property, which would not be counted towards the licensing requirement. And another example, if a property owner lives in their main home and rents out a secondary suite there, and they also own and rent out one single family home elsewhere, they would still be exempt. And this is because the principal residence property and units would not count towards the two property threshold. So the primary goal of this updated framework is to modernize our existing regulations. The aim is to establish clear, consistent, and enforceable licensing requirements, specifically for those residential rental properties operating as more significant businesses. And this initiative will help us achieve several key objectives. First, to establish a consistent and fair framework. This ensures that these specific rental businesses are formally licensed, similar to other businesses in the district. Second, and importantly, this framework would serve to reinforce owner responsibility for existing property standards. So while the district will not be inspecting individual dwelling units as part of this license, the owner will be required to sign a declaration to formally affirm that their properties comply with applicable laws. And this would include their existing obligations under the BC Building Code, the BC Fire Code, and the district's Standards of Maintenance Bylaw. The license itself provides a formal record of this owner acknowledgement. If issues arise regarding property conditions, tenants retain their full recourse through the provincial residential tenancy branch, which is the primary avenue for addressing such matters. District staff can also provide information to tenants about these support tools. Third, the data gathered will allow us to better inform future housing policy, and this will allow us to create a more accurate inventory of a specific segment of our rental market, and it will help us monitor trends and plan for future growth more effectively. And fourth, this approach helps to align the district's regulations more closely with common practices observed across other Metro Vancouver municipalities, the majority of which license residential rental operations. So in terms of regional practices, staff have conducted a review of Metro Vancouver municipalities, and it was found that the majority of Metro Vancouver municipalities do require business licenses for rental properties. And this indicates that licensing residential rentals as a business activity is a common regulatory practice across the region. When looking at fees, the median annual fee was found to be approximately $138 per dwelling unit. Exemptions are common, with many municipalities providing exemptions based on the type of property being rented or the scale of a rental operation. For example, some municipalities exempt dwelling units located on an owner's principal residence lot, and this is very similar to the targeted approach we are proposing. Many also use an owner declaration form for compliance at the licensing stage rather than conducting direct inspections, and this is also the model we are proposing. And many municipalities rely on bylaw tickets and fines for enforcement of licensing requirements. So staff believe that the proposed licensing framework aligns well with these general trends while being specifically designed to respond to our individual community's context. So turning now to proposed fees, compliance mechanisms, and enforcement approaches. For this framework, an annual fee of $140 per dwelling unit is proposed, which would apply to all dwelling units located on properties that meet the licensing criteria. And this fee is designed primarily for administrative cost recovery of the licensing program. Compliance will rely on an owner declaration. In this declaration, the owner would affirm that their licensed properties comply with all applicable laws. Like short-term rentals, the district would not be conducting property inspections as a specific condition of issuing or renewing a business license. And this approach simplifies implementation and recognizes the primary jurisdiction of a province for tenancy standards. Enforcement related to the specific business license would focus on ensuring applicable owners obtain and maintain their license. And this would primarily be managed on a complaint basis and through ongoing monitoring by bylaw services. Penalties for operating without a license or for providing false information on a declaration would be applied as outlined in the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. And issues related to property standards, maintenance, and safety within a tenancy will continue to be addressed under the Provincial Residential Tenancy Act and through the Residential Tenancy Branch. The district standards of maintenance bylaw remains a separate tool for addressing specific complaints about property conditions in applicable buildings, enforced through its own complaint-based process. Regarding the next steps in this process, following tonight's public meeting, council will have the opportunity to consider second and third readings of all three bylaw amendments at a future regular meeting. And should council proceed with those readings and grant final adoption, staff would move forward with implementation. Phase one of implementation would focus on awareness and education and would occur during the remainder of 2025, with voluntary applications being accepted. Phase two would begin in 2026, and business licenses would become a mandatory requirement for all applicable properties. So in summary, the proposed fee structure would be $140 annually per dwelling unit on the licensed properties, and this fee is designed primarily for administrative cost recovery of a program. For enforcement, the focus is on compliance with the licensing requirement itself. Proposed fines for operating without a license or for providing false information would be established in the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. The key objectives of the initiative are to establish a consistent and fair licensing scheme, to reinforce owner responsibility for existing safety and maintenance standards, to gather data that will inform future housing policy, and to align with common practices observed in other Metro Vancouver municipalities. And finally, implementation will follow a two-phased approach, beginning with outreach and a period of voluntary compliance. So this concludes the presentation. Thank you for your time, and staff are available to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maselli. Normally at this time, we would go to speakers who have signed up in advance. And I just want to confirm that there are no speakers who have signed up at this point. which means that we would now go to people in the chambers. And if there is anyone here who did not sign up, would you like to speak? Don't all jump at once. First time here. Well, welcome.
Hello,
Um,
everyone.
So before you start, we'll need your name and spelling and your approximate address, please.
Sure. My name is Alex Kang, K-A-N-G. I live in Lynn Valley. So I've been a resident of the District of North Vancouver my whole life. I actually, in fact, still live in the same house that I grew up in. I've been watching this work very, very closely. For a long time, I used to participate in something called couch surfing, which was free Airbnb before you could make money off of it. For a long time, I hosted people, made lots of friends from all around the world. Unfortunately, that opportunity is no longer around, so now it's all profit. But I'm very interested in just sort of seeing how this is playing out. I think the only comment that I have is I've been watching very carefully for a long time, looking at the updates on the website, trying to understand what the dynamics are. I guess my only feedback is, first, thank you for the presentation. Second, the sooner clarity is provided, the better. It's just, I understand the timelines that are there. But it's also just a call out for clarity in communication, I think would be helpful. Just trying to understand where are we going? Because frankly, I'm a little confused from the information that's on the website that was updated relatively recently. And I think I might be a little bit out of my depth here regardless, because this is, anyway, thank you very much for the opportunity. This is, I think, something that hopefully will be good for our community. I understand there's lots of for and against, but I think it's time marches on.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the room or online that wants to speak at this time? Seeing none, I'll move to council questions. Do we have any questions for staff?
Yes, Your Worship, we received one question from a member of council requesting further detailed information on the comparable fees charged by other Metro Vancouver municipalities. And I'll refer this query to John Maselli.
Thank you. Through Your Worship. So as part of this process, staff interviewed upper staff at 16 Metro Vancouver municipalities and compiled a table of their applicable fees, which is attached to the latest council report. The median fee that we found was $138 for this year, and the average fee was $200, just because some municipalities are on the higher end. In general, the district's current fee is on the lower end at $33.60.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from councilors?
Your Worship, we have no further questions at this time.
I'm sorry, I'm.
Apologies. Your Worship, at this time, we have no further questions from council.
Thank you, Ms. T. Are there any other people in the room? I'm just going to do a final scan who want to speak, or anyone standing by online. Seeing none, then if there are no further questions, I would ask for a motion on the staff recommendation. Councillor Hanson, I'll second it, or Councillor Back was seconding it, I guess. So show of hands, all in favor? Opposed? Passed. Thank you very much. Thanks for everyone for coming out tonight. Pardon me? Okay. So, yeah, do we have a motion for adjournment? We just did that. Okay. So thank you very much for coming out. That's it. Meeting adjourned.